and welcome back to the Citytilidie channel. Hope you're all staying safe and well. And one of our moments in time, I'm going to take you back 96 years as I'm recording this in 2022. So I'm going to take you back almost 100 years. Yes, even I wasn't around. I was at least 33 years away from being anywhere near this planet, in all fairness. So there you go. And it's subtitled, this little thing. It should have been 16. Yes, just a play on it should have been 10. But this is called It Should Have Been 16. So interesting. City, of course, at the time, a small club. No history, of course, City, have we? But we just recently, so I think this is our third season, moved into our new home at Main Road, of course, as Hyde Road was just a little bit too small for us. This was, of course, the biggest ground built outside of Wembley. There were plans to make it even bigger, but obviously with the 1920s and various things happening with those economically, it never really happened, unfortunately. But hey, still the biggest crowd outside of Wembley. And it was a season where it was generally thought that the saying "typical City" came into being. So we'll have a look at that. It became City's mantra, if you like. I'm going to look at an FA Cup game. I'm going to look at an FA Cup fifth round match at Main Road on February 20th, 1926 against Crystal Palace. So let's have a bit of background to the game. We were a first division outfit then in that season. And since the runners-up spot to Burnley in the season 2021, we've been comfortable in the league without pulling up any trees. We've been mid-table finishes, but only one major trophy in our time, of course, back in 1904. So we could do with winning one or two more, couldn't we, just to establish ourselves, although City were thought to be one of the biggest teams and biggest names, certainly crowd-pulling-wise. City were always very, very popular. But in the league, things were ticking away, but that was about it. It wasn't getting great. But there's always the FA Cup, wasn't there? Always FA Cup to look forward to. And of course, as is now, as is, I'm going to do loads of these vlogs, and I'm talking about the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, even the 90s and the olds. A lot was expected, passions were high and high expectations. And it was the same with this season, this 25-26 season. But soon, again, as is the case now, things started to unravel. By the time City had entered the FA Cup on January 9th in round 3, as it was then, we had won just 6 league games out of 25 and lost 12, so not going too well. Certainly not title-winning form. And we struggled in and around the relegation zone. There was two spots for relegation at that stage all season. So a big cup run was always a biggie. Say the FA Cup was just as important as a league in those days. And it was always welcome, of course, to ease the stresses and tension of the league games if they weren't going too well. And a big highlight, of course, even though things were a bit, we played superbly one week and rubbish the next. We'd recently been to Old Trafford on the 23rd of January, 1926, and recorded a good score, a 6-1 victory. Remember that? Sort of sounds familiar these days, doesn't it? But a great 6-1 victory at Old Trafford. This was a season where we'd beat Burnley at home one week, 8-3, and then 2 days later we'd gone to Sheffield United and Bramall Lane and lost 8-3. This is the sort of problems we were having the 1925-26 season. The then manager David Ashworth parted company with City in November, and City oddly didn't immediately get a replacement, which was strange. I mean, sometimes in those days, like secretaries and managers, it wasn't as specific as it was these, in later days. But they sort of run it by committee. They run the team by committee, which turned out to not be the greatest idea that the City board and the City guys had in those times. But say we got rid of our manager in November. We didn't replace him until right at the end of the season. How about the game itself? Yeah, we're talking this game. Of course, you've probably seen it on the thumbnails. Manchester City 11, Crystal Palace 4. So, of course, a record in itself as far as City are concerned. And writing for the City Matchday programme on the 28th of April 1973, so a long time later, for a meeting with Palace then, the Guardian's Eric Todd sort of went back and had a quick look at this game and tells us a little bit of a story about it. So I'll just read his excerpt from that programme. about this game. He said this was yet another of City's funny seasons. In the third round of the Cup, they scored 7 goals in 2 games against the famous Corinthians. There you go, Corinthians were in it. You think back there in the 1800s, but they're still knocking around in the 1920s. In the fourth round, they beat Huddersfield Town 4-0 at Main Road. But we were to make history with that thrashing, or this thrashing of Crystal Palace. And in case you think the above score is a misprint, 11-4, a writer at that time insisted that 16-7, there you go, there's where the subtitle came from, 16-7 would have been a fairer result to City, of course. City turned out refreshed after a stay at Whitley Bay, there you go, right, nice and breezy, while Palace had been enjoying the clean air of Buxton. Oh, good old Palace. They had little enough to enjoy beyond that. After 5 minutes, McCracken fouled Hicks and Austin scored with the penalty. Roberts scored in the 15th and 25th minutes, Johnson in the 30th, Roberts again in the 34th, and 2 from Browell made it 7-0 before half-time. Yeah, it should have been 10. Against all belief, Palace fought back in a great style, and Cherrett scored a fine goal in the 55th minute. Bromwell made it 8-1 after an hour, but Cherrett pulled one back for Palace and followed 2 wonderful saves by Callender from Austin and Roberts. Clark beat Goodchild twice in quick succession. Once a penalty after his first shot had been parried by Goodchild. The crowd, according to a contemporary report, were full of praise for the fighting qualities of the Crystal Palace players, and those spectators who had made the journey from London entertained brief hopes of a replay. But Roberts, with 2 more goals, put pay to any further impertinence on the part of Palace, and just before the end, Hicks, who had waited patiently in the queue, had the satisfaction of scoring City's 11th goal. In spite of the fact that it looked an easy thing for City, Palace in those days were in the southern section of the 3rd Division. The crowd numbered 61,630 with receipts of £3,358. I don't know how many shillings and pence. By the way, I forgot to mention, this is Eric Todd, by the way, I forgot to mention that City were beaten 2-0 on Palace's ground in the first round in 1921. So this was what you might call revenge with compound interest. Yeah, the teams that day, Palace's team, Callender, Little, Cross, McCracken, Coyle, Greener, Harrit, Blakemore, Cherrett, Hawkes and Clark. And City's team that day, Goodchild, Cookson, McCloy, Coupland, Cowan, Pringle, Austin, Browell, Roberts, Johnson and Hicks. Yeah, and it was said after the game, I think I was reading something that Gary James did on this, that the City fans actually invaded the pitch with their delight and actually carried off the Palace keeper shoulder high for his brave attempts during the game. And it was pointed out, I don't think he would have been carried off. It had been the other way around the score line. But hey, that's City fans' view, isn't it? But why the typical City? Why did they call it? Why did that come into fruition? I mean, it's just normal of City this to do things like that. Well, if our League and FA Cup matchups hadn't been inconsistent enough in themselves, as you can see from some of those scores I read out to you earlier, then how this season actually panned out would put a top hat on it, as you say. In the Cup, after this game, we saw off Clapton Orient in the quarter-finals, and we dispatched our old chums United in a 3-0 in the semi-finals at Bramall Lane. As things began to look up in the league, we started to actually win 1 or 2 games. We'd travelled to Wembley to play Bolton, who were the firm favourites for this, playing well above us in the league, playing very, very well. And the Bolton themselves were still smarted, of course. I didn't mention the one victory we had in the FA Cup in 1904. It was Bolton Wanderers we defeated that day. Of course, it was still smarting and out for revenge over 20 years later. And they would get that revenge, beating us 1-0 despite a brave effort by City in the last knockings of the game to get an equaliser. Bolton held out for a 1-0 victory. And this was actually the first FA Cup final broadcast live on the radio. Yes, okay, but is that typical City? It's only an FA Cup defeat. Well, unlucky. Could have happened to any team? Probably. Well, could this have happened to any team? Certainly not up to that stage in history anyway. Well, let's go back to the league with an away match at Newcastle only to play. City sat 1 point. Yeah, we had 2 games after this cup final. We beat Leeds at home, so we only had Newcastle to play away from home. And we actually sat 1 point above the 2 relegation places. We actually sat 4th from the bottom with a better goal average than those teams below us. But a missed penalty and a 3-2 defeat with the other teams winning below us meant we were relegated. So typical City, it meant that typical City had become the first team had become the first team ever to play in an FA Cup final and be relegated in the same season. Of course, there'll be many occasions like this to come in our typical Cityitis, in our rich history, but those who witnessed that day, that record-breaking 11-4 victory over Palace, surely wouldn't have expected the season to end in such disappointment and disarray for City. Of course, we did get a new manager sorted out, but it's far too little too late. And even worse was to follow, off the pitch, economically. Yes, we had the general strike to come just literally days after the last game was played. So that wasn't good. And we spent 2 years then wallowing in the second division before Peter Hodge, the new manager that we'd nicked from Leicester City, won the second division title in 27-28. And yes, better times, but typical City times will be ahead for us from then on. Thanks for joining me for this little moments in time. Yes, I look back at Manchester City 11, Crystal Palace 4 on February the 20th, 1926. I won't ask you if you've got any memories of this, guys. I doubt any of you out there would have any memories of this time, but just let me know. Any thought, anything you want to share, guys, just let me know. As I say, I did a recent one on the 10-1 3 or 4 months ago, which has been published. I'm not too sure when this is going out, but 11-4. What a cracking game! But as I say, this is only typical City. You win 8-3 one day and then lose 8-3 2 days later. Well, it's great being a City fan, isn't it? Thanks for watching, guys. Please, until we meet again, stay safe, Blues. Come on, City. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.